So, hello and welcome to everyone who is watching. I really appreciate you coming out today. My name is Ryan Claytor. I am the professor of comic studies at Michigan State University. I teach the studio courses there, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about that today. I just introduced myself, and over the course of my brief lecture today, I'm going to talk to you about a few things. First are the comic art and graphic novel studio courses that we offer here at MSU. Then those lead into the MSU Comic Art and Graphic Novel minor course of study. And in addition to that, we have a number of other resources like the MSU Comic Art and Graphic Novel podcast, the MSU Comics Forum, and the MSU Special Collections Library. And finally, we have a scholarship in comic studies. So let's start off with those studio courses. So the first studio course is STA 201, or Fundamentals of Comic Art and Graphic Novels. And over the course of a semester, students complete several short story comics. And by the end of the semester, the students will compile those comics into their own books, at which point the students will typically sign and sell their books at a local comic book store. So these are some of the in-store signings that we've had over the course of the years. And this past year, obviously, we could not do that. So we pivoted to an online event where students sold their digital versions of their books. The STA 301 is the Advanced Comic Art and Graphic Novels course. And instead of completing several short stories over the course of the semester, students are tasked with completing one longer length comics narrative. And typically, at the end of the semester, instead of an in-store signing, they do an in-store signing tour where they sign and sell their books across the state of Michigan at several different stops. Now, again, this was moved online, only instead of simply selling digital versions of their comics, the students had the option of conducting a Kickstarter campaign and have me coach them through the crowdfunding process. Now, one of the students that took me up on that offer managed to raise over $2,500 for their very first Kickstarter campaign with the comic that they produced in that advanced comics course. So very proud of my students is the long story short. And this is a flyer for the courses that are being offered next year. We've got a couple in the fall, the intro and the advanced, and then a couple of intro courses in the spring of 2022. So these courses lead into the Michigan State University Comic Art and Graphic Novel minor course of study, which is an undergraduate minor that's housed in the art department, but it's actually an interdisciplinary minor between the art and English departments at Michigan State University. So if you want to know more about this, you can go to this easy to remember URL, or I try to actually make it easier for you to remember with a tinyurl.com/MSU Comics Minor. And that will take you to the same darn place as that big long address, which is this Office of the Registrar homepage, which talks to you about all the requirements of the minor, which are essentially 5 different classes. The 2 studio courses I just mentioned, an English course in comics literature, another art course, and then the 5th course is actually part of a pool of classes that you can use to tailor your minor to a more art or a more literature focused experience. And that is the Comic Art and Graphic Novel minor. And I want to talk to you about a few resources we have on campus too. So the first one is the Comic Art and Graphic Novel podcast. So this podcast has a number of different segments. It starts with regional comics announcements, comics happenings around MSU and surrounding areas. Then we talk to our special collections bibliographer, who I will talk about in just a moment. But the core of each episode is an in-depth creator interview with a different award-winning cartoonist. We've had plenty of different names. I don't even want to start because I'm sure I'll forget many, but we have almost 40 episodes that are up and live and free for you to download at this URL, msucomics.libsyn.com. And you can find us on any podcatching app from iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Intune, etc. you name it, and we are probably there. And if we're not, let me know. I'd like to get us there, but I think we're pretty well covered at this point. We've also been nominated for a podcast award in the education category for the People's Choice Podcast Awards. And here we are alongside a bunch of other really great educational podcasts. So another resource that we have at Michigan State University for comics is the MSU Comics Forum, which is a multi-day event for scholars, creators, and fans of comics. And we have a great number of events associated with the forum every year. The headlining events are our 2 keynote speakers. The first keynote speech is from an award-winning creator, and here is lauded Canadian cartoonist Seth speaking to a packed room in our library. And we also bring in a second keynote speaker who is an award-winning scholar. So here is Kiana Whitted speaking to another standing room only during one of our MSU Comics forums. We also have an artist alley with dozens of creators behind a table of their own work, to academic panel discussions with scholars coming from literally all over the world to discuss their work in comics, to exhibitions of comic art from the MSU Special Collections Library, to reading discussions, film screenings, ancillary book signings, and the proverbial more. Every year we try to add more and more to the show. And as of this year, as you may have heard Bob and I talking about, we have now been running the Comics Forum for 14 consecutive years. This is something, as the director of the show, I am very proud of my team for helping me put this together each and every year. And we look forward to more shows moving into the future. And one thing I always forget to tell people is that all events associated with the MSU Comics Forum are absolutely free and open to the public. You do not have to be a professor or student or staff at MSU. Anybody is welcome to come and experience any of these events absolutely free of charge. And if you want to know more about it, you can go to this URL, comicsforum.msu.edu, and you should be able to find out more about it. So another resource we have, I've sort of been teasing all presentation here, and that is the MSU Special Collections Library, which is this unassuming glassed-in reading room on the first floor of the Michigan State University main library. Now, what you may not know is that underneath the floor of this reading room sits the largest public collection of comic books in the world. I'm going to let that sit with you for just a moment. At Michigan State University, we have the largest public collection of comic books anywhere in the world, in the galaxy. Now, I know that the Billy Ireland has a fantastic resource for original artwork, and they have the largest original artwork collection, and I don't want to take anything away from them. In fact, I have visited the Billy myself and was astounded at everything they have. But we sort of work in tandem with one another. So if we get original artwork, we send donators down to the Billy, and likewise, if the Billy receives large collections of comic books, they've sent them our way in the past before. So we really kind of fit those niches very well. But we are the ones who have the largest public collection of comic books in the world, and I would be remiss if I mentioned this without talking about the man behind this collection, Randy Scott. Now, Randy Scott is this lovely fellow who has been working at Michigan State University libraries since the early 1970s, and he has made it his life's work to amass this world-class collection. So again, this MSU Special Collections Library, home of the largest public collection of comic books in the world, is not only accessible to students. You know, if you want to come and check out, I say check out, meaning read it in our reading room. Wonder Woman #1, we have it. Walt Disney Comics and Stories #1, we have it. You know, these are books that are worth tens of thousands of dollars that you are able to read and access. You know, this is really a testament to Randy Scott and his staunch belief in the readability of comics, not slabbing them and frittering them away to never be read again. You know, these are accessible books. And finally, the last resource I wanted to mention is the Capital City Comic Con Michigan State University Scholarship in Comics Studies. So we have a local convention in town called the Capital City Comic Con. And together we put on this scholarship in comic studies. And this is only open to Michigan State University comic studies students. So this is not a nationwide scholarship. It's not a university-wide scholarship or a departmental-wide scholarship. This is only open to MSU Comic Studies students. It's a very narrow applicant pool. And I'm really happy with everything we're able to offer the scholarship recipient, which I will go into right now. So first of all, the recipient's artwork is used to promote the event. So it's used anywhere from the website to publications around town. This is our local arts and entertainment magazine, the Lansing City Pulse, with a distribution of over 30,000 copies. And this particular year, they did this great write-up about Christy Hans, the scholarship recipient winner, and this huge fold-out of their artwork. In addition to that, the artwork is printed on the program book, and the recipient gets a free table to exhibit and sell their work. And if that wasn't enough, they also get $1,000 cold hard cash in their pocket to have and to hold. That is not tied to books. It's not tied to tuition. It's not tied to room and board. That is $1,000 for the recipient to have and to hold and to do what they want with. We hope that you make comics with it, but we don't check up on you. So this is an image of Christy Hans accepting her award from then Capital City Comic Con owner, James Curtis. And that is all I want to talk to you about today. But I think the stars of the show are still yet to come. I have a few students with me today, and I would like to turn over the show to them. So first up, I believe we have Antoinette, if I am not mistaken. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
Thank you. Yeah. Just getting my screen up.
In the meantime, I want to thank each of my students for coming out today. I'm really glad that you're here. I can't wait to showcase your work and hear about some of your experiences in the program here. So thanks again for being here, guys.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Antoinette Davis, and I am a mixed Filipino-American student here at Michigan State University. I transferred here from Lansing Community College about 2 years ago, and my major is in graphic design, and my minor is in the comic art and graphic novels that Brian Claytor has been talking about. I am also the author of 2 short comics, Right and Other Short Comics, and Morning Frankie. These 2 projects were born through the MSU Comics program, and through my work, I am interested in discussing all things horror and romance, which has me settled comfortably in the genre of monster romance, which is, if you're not familiar, it's like most popularized, I think, with the movie Shape of Water. But like anything from like vampire romances does count. So my first self-published mini comic was Right and Other Short Comics. I made this in the introduction class, and it's a short collection of stories that explores monsters and our human relationships with them. I had gone and printed and hand assembled 200 copies of this comic myself, and then took the time to bring the title story, Right, to the webcomic platform Line Webtoon, where I went and expanded upon this story until I reached about 74 pages. And this story at the time was, when I first created it for the comic class, was 10 pages. And so I just took the summer and I just rolled with it, and I ended up at 74. The fact that I made 74 pages over the summer made this next project in the advanced class less daunting. My second self-published book is Morning Frankie, and this is a queer Filipino-American vampire story which begins to explore the long-lasting connections of fictional monsters to like queerness, and while also being a nod to my own ethnic identity, specifically here in the United States. This comic was kickstarted for printing, and I ended up getting an overwhelming amount of support on it and was able to print, offset print 500 copies of my book when originally I only asked for about $500 and only wanted to print a small amount digitally. I'm now currently in the process to also adapting this comic for Line Webtoon. So going through coloring the pages and then reassembling them for that Webtoon release. So the fact of the matter is that neither of these projects would have been completed without the comic art and graphic novel minor here at MSU. I took the intro class taught by Ryan Claytor my first year at MSU, basically on a whim. Prior to this program, I was kind of on and off with the idea of comics. My general opinion about it was that it felt like very tedious, overwhelming, and largely under-gratifying as an art medium, with the amount of work and how little story you can get through with that amount of work. And now it still at times feels tedious and overwhelming, but the ability to complete a comic has me truly fully invested in this method of storytelling, as it is incredibly powerful. So the MSU Comic Studies has helped me define myself as an artist and develop the tools that I need to be able to complete projects. The classes associated with the minor have helped me think about storytelling and comics beyond just art styles, and more focused on the flow and creative page layouts and what you can do basically with the page beyond just the art. And the most beneficial thing that has helped me with these classes is the opportunity to make money off my own work, which is something that is often overlooked in art majors, especially. In 2 years of being in the comics program, I've managed to self-publish 2 comics and kickstart one of those and sell those with online, with my own online store. And if I was told that that's what would end up happening to me when I was just going to MSU that first year, I probably would have never believed you. So that's my general experience with the MSU Comics program.
Great. Thanks so much, Antoinette. And I think David is up next.
Is that coming through? I can't tell. I think it is.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay. All right. Okay. So sorry about that. My name is David Holley. I am an advertising major here at MSU, and I am also studying comic art and graphic novels as my minor. I am originally from Fort Myers, Florida, and through a long story that I don't have enough time to explain here, I ended up here in East Lansing, Michigan. And in that time, I went to Lansing Community College, and I then transferred to MSU in the fall 2020. But that's getting a little bit ahead of the story. Back in high school, I was attending an art school, and I had the intentions of actually going to the Savannah College of Art and Design to attend their sequential art program. But just the way that life worked out, I ended up being here in Michigan. And so, through here, I'm now going to go ahead and showcase some of the work I have. A lot of the work that I am currently working on showcases work as far as the human experience, very specifically race, gender, sexuality. And then I will also dabble in ideas of mental health and social economics and stuff like that. And so yeah, so that tends to be the work that I am currently taking part in. And over the course of this past semester, so I am currently just coming out of the Fundamentals Art program. And I've only been able to produce one mini comic so far. And as you see on the screen, it's called About Flowers. And this is a collection of 3 short stories. And I will showcase a little bit of each one. And so this first one was referred to as Forget Me Not. And this was a self-therapeutic exploration of childhood and more of like the beginnings of that process. This is an idea that I would like to explore further on. But that is where we're at. And then the next page is going to show a couple different highlight pages of the next 2 comics that were referred to as Rose and Periwinkle, and Periwinkle and Rose, and then Marigold and Marjoram. And each of these stories focuses on either sexuality and gender, in the sense of the first story that focuses on the day-to-day life of a gay married couple, and then the second story focuses on the trauma and complicated relationship of grief in relation to emergency. And so, yeah, and those are stories I'm actually expanding into the work I'm actually doing in the fall. And so I'm currently actually working on that during the summer, so that way I can have that during the fall to work on. As far as my experience at MSU goes, in regards to the comic art program, as I mentioned before, I transferred here from Lansing Community College in the fall of 2020. And at that time when I transferred, I initially had only seen that there was an animation program, or sorry, animation minor, I should say. And I was originally taking that. And when I first signed up, there was actually only the journalism comic course that was available. And so I ended up taking that instead of an actual animation course. But through that, I had actually discovered that MSU did have a proper comic art minor. And so I decided in the following semester in the spring that I was going to start doing that. And that was actually kind of a win decision to make, because I was originally going to take the spring off. But then I decided to go back into it, and there was one more spot left. And so I took the spot for the fundamentals course, and I'm so glad I did, because it has changed how I'm actually progressing through the rest of my school. Going into it, I knew the basics of making comics. I've always been a fan of comics and storytelling and stuff like that. And so going into it, I had a very basic idea, but there was always this barrier as far as not knowing the exact, technical like application of making a comic and making the story flow, as far as the panel to panel and other aspects of making comics like that. So, so that was one barrier that I had going in. And then also I knew instinctively that I was probably going to be the oldest student, because I'm 26 right now. And so that was actually a very interesting barrier to kind of push through and to navigate. But to specifically talk about that aspect of my experience with the course, the 2 factors I had in relation to being the oldest student was that because I'm 26 and the majority of my classmates were 18, 19, 20, there is a generational difference, millennial versus Gen Z. And so even just in conversations or in critiques, or just even conversations of comics itself, there would be, excuse me, that's not English. There would be just conversational differences and references. I remember specifically that there was a critique, and we were talking about one student's work, and Professor Claytor and I had actually mentioned that one student's work reminded us of Daria, which is an older show, but they didn't know of that reference. And so just stuff like that, it was interesting to navigate. But also going into it, I knew there would be a difference of experience, because as I had mentioned before, back in Florida, I went to a specialized high school that had a focus on arts. And so I took visual arts in that time. And so I was classically trained through that experience. And then I continued practicing my my craft after that. And so I knew going into it that a lot of these students, because the only prereq to this course is drawing one, and so I knew that a lot of the students were just coming from that. And so I had to modify how I talked about and critique their work to make sure that I wasn't trying to speak above them from experience, but also trying to still help them in a way that made sense to their point in their creative journeys. As far as the impact of the courses go so far, it really has helped me to cross out a goal in my life of creating and publishing a comic. And not only that, it's been able to provide a space that I can fail and learn and develop even further as a comic artist. And from there, I've been able to get the courage and the ambition to pursue comic art as a profession, because that was something I wanted to do when I was younger, but then just the way that life had kind of flowed, that dream had died to some degree. But now that I've gone through this course and I'm going through the advanced course in the fall, I'm more prepared than ever, and I'm more excited than ever to actually pursue that as a lifelong career. And just the what phrase am I looking for? Sorry. Just the I'm so sorry. The work was well received. I'm just going to go based on my notes to just the feedback from the work that I've been able to do just in this first comic has been so amazing. It's been incredible. I actually had a really in-depth conversation with my mom yesterday about it. And just to hear feedback and just how it has impacted people now with such a small 36-page book. It's given me the confidence to be able to make work that is much longer, much more subtle and nuanced, and it just creating spaces that allow people to relate to work in some way. And yeah, that is everything for my piece. And I just want to say thank you to Ryan Claytor for allowing me to be a part of this panel with him and the other students.
David, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. And Sofia, I think you're going to bring us home today. And while Sofia is getting her presentation ready, I thought I would also put out a call for anyone watching on YouTube or Facebook. And I think there's some Twitch streams going on too. If anybody has any questions about MSU Comic Studies or for any of my students, David, Sofia, Antoinette, please chime in the chats. I'm sitting here on Facebook and YouTube, so I'll try to keep an eye on that. And Bob, maybe if you see something on Twitter, you can let us know. All right, Sofia, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Did it stop presenting? I think so. Okay. Can you hear me? Yes, okay, cool. So hi, I'm Sofia Abreu. I'm a graduate student in the Prime program. I'll explain in a second what that means. But I always get a little bit nervous, so I hope that this flows and what I say makes sense. Also, I lost my presentation in all of these tabs. I'm ready. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about my wanderings and my experience with the MSU Comic Studies program. And as I said, I'm a graduate student in the program in mathematics education at MSU. And so my background is, I've been in the math world for a while. I graduated from math, and for me, I've never been like a person of very good with words, but at the same time, I haven't really been like 100% just visual. So I never found a space either in the art world or in the academic world. So I felt like that was like on me. I was like something wrong. But then, sorry, there you go. But then Nick Susan is published on flattening, and that changed my way of viewing things. It was what I was waiting for my entire life. And for people that are not familiar with this work, it's the first graduate dissertation that it was written fully in comic book form, and precisely challenges and questions why we have so much, or why we value so much words over image, especially in terms of what we call valuable knowledge, or in academia, what is publishable and what's valued. So I always bring up this quote from that comic book because I feel like it very shortly says a lot. And it says, in relying on text as the primary means of formulating understanding, what stands outside its linear structures is dismissed, labeled irrational, nor more conceivable than the notion of upwards to a flatlander. That's a reference to a book called Flatland. And the visual provides expression where words fail. What have we been missing? And what can be made visible when we work in a format that is not only about, but is also the thing itself. So I love this quote because precisely it highlights how, yes, words are helpful, they are valuable, but there are some things that just cannot be captured with words. And what are we missing because we're dismissing some other ways of expressing and of sharing knowledge? So precisely this idea of what is valuable knowledge and how we prefer one over the other. All of this has to do also with philosophical exploration. So a lot of my work is guided by philosophical explorations and wonderings of what we consider valuable knowledge and what we consider to be desirable. So part of my work and part of why I like comics is because they allow me to explore continuities and precisely not be stuck in this linearity, right? So we can have, yes, a sequential linearity, but we can also have an all-over relationality in the page. And it allows for a lot of keeping what I believe is very important, like a fundamental aspect of life, which is the continuity. It's not one or the other. It can be both at the same time, and there's like a flow to it. So for me, my work is all of it. Like, it's poems, it's a way of expressing myself, it's a way of wandering, and it's also a way of conversing with myself and with ideas that I want to understand further. So here is some examples of my work after the class that I took in MSU. And as I said, I like having the linearity still. That's an important aspect, but at the same time, I like to play with the all-over relationality of the page and the flow and the continuity. So for example, in Somos Mar, which means we are sea, I try to not use any panels, like any restrictions, and just follow the flow so that there's a linearity, but at the same time, everything together is just like the waves, and the continuity and the flow is also an important part. And here's another example. This was about the pandemic and how it coexists, right? My being entirely alone, and then also seeking out, like going back to Mexico. I went back to Mexico for a while to be with my family, and these tensions of closeness and isolation. And right now, I wish I could show you, but I'm working on a comic around a conversation in a 5th grade classroom about space. But because of regulations, I cannot do that, but I'm very excited. I'm working with my advisor. And my experience with the program at MSU, one, I had no idea it existed, but I am extremely happy that a friend invited me to the 2020 MSU Comics Forum, and would you believe it, Nick Susanis was the keynote speaker for that year. I was mind blown. I felt it was destiny. And right away, honestly, yeah, if you can go to the Comics Forum, as Ryan talked about, there's so much at MSU in terms of comics. And I learned about the comics minor. I emailed everyone that I had to get into that class. And they let me be in the class. So I was the happiest person. I was so happy. I was super tired, but it was so worth it. It was that type of exhaustion that is like gratifying. And yeah, I had like the biggest bags under my eyes, but I don't know, at the end of that semester, I was very happy. And yeah, I was just very grateful to be at MSU. I had no idea this was here. I just came here for my program. So I'm always very grateful for everything that Ryan has done in this department at MSU. And here you can see, this is my first comic that I did in the fundamentals of comic art and graphic novels class. And is my artist statement. And here, I hope you can see that I was precisely trying to start playing with this idea of continuity, of flow, of not staying within a confined panel. And I think it was a good first try. And then this was my some pages of my final project for that class as well. And where I could fully see now, yes, can I do this or not, in terms of exploring philosophical ideas with something that I felt was more compatible, or it flowed more naturally from me in terms of sharing philosophical ideas and explore these ideas. And yes, this program has helped me a lot. One, yes, it provided me the space for me to explore, because one thing is to have this feeling that maybe it could be a good idea to explore philosophical ideas with comics, and the other one is actually doing it and seeing if it actually flows. And it did. And not only the space, but also having a community that helps you helps you know whether what you're doing is effective, if it could be better, and just know what you can work on to improve what you want to do. And being part of that community, it was very, very helpful. Sometimes you're in your mind, you're like, this is the perfect comic, and then you show it, it's like, I have no idea what happened in that page. So it's good to have that feedback, and also ideas of how you can make it more clear. And yeah, and honestly, at first I think my committee let me take that class just so that I could stop, just so that I stop bothering them. But now they take me seriously about it, and now I'm working in a comic book with my advisor in the program. So I'm extremely grateful. The whole path of my graduate experience has changed because of this course. And I really, really hope that this just, I really hope that this goes somewhere in terms in a long-term thing. And if it doesn't matter. It's just a very meaningful part of my life already. And I'm working on comics on my own. So yeah, I'm very grateful. And yeah, that's me.
Well, thank you, Sofia. I really appreciate you and David and Antoinette and all the students at MSU who have gone through my classes, but you guys especially right now today for painting a picture of your own work and what you've been through at Michigan State University and how it's helped you. I really appreciate your time. So if there are any questions, you are free to post in the YouTube chat. I saw Chris Lachowski. Chris, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, but Chris says, glad you're pondering this in academia, Sofia. So Sofia, you've got some watchers on YouTube right now. I saw some folks chiming in over on Facebook. But again, if you have any questions in the next couple minutes here, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, I am available at R.Claytor, that's my name, R like Ryan, and then Claytor, Claytor, at MSU, like Michigan State University.edu. So once again, that's R.Claytor at MSU.edu. If there's any questions that you might have about Michigan State University Comic Studies, or for any of the students that you see here.
Am I too old to go?
No, we make no discrimination on age either. As David can attest to, right? At the ripe old age of 26.
Yeah, I'm restarted my life again last year, so have some open time.
It looks like Chris Lachowski is chiming in here. It says, I have a question for Sofia. I don't know what it is, but I'm assuming they're typing it right now.
Yeah, Chris has been an exhibitor, and I know I've seen him up in Cleveland at some shows up there. So,
right. Bob, did you have any questions?
Well, I just asked that one. So it sounds like you're a tough taskmaster too, from what I'm hearing here. I don't know if it's you or your students seem to think that's a lot of work. This program. So.
Well, you've got a good audience of people to ask that. David, Antoinette, Sofia, what do you guys feel about the workload?
The workload of the classes.
Yeah, the comics program, the comic studio courses. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear too.
I think that it's not for the faint of heart, for sure. I think that I know some students who definitely did struggle with managing the workload, but like at the same time, some students, like including myself at times, like they get so caught up in what they're making because it is so personal to them that like you end up doing way extra, and then you're over there like telling me like, now you need to stop. Like you're good, no more pages. So
David, Sofia, any thoughts?
I think Antoinette brought a good point. I'm one of those people that need to be told to stop. And yeah, if nobody tells me, I'm going to be there until 4 a.m. and suddenly like, oh my God, I need to go to sleep. But I still need to fix this one thing, so I'll just fix it.
So, Sofia, I was kind of curious. You said you were in math previously, and
yes.
So which one's harder? I'm an engineer by profession and education, and a cartoonist on the weekends, and now full time. So I'm kind of interested. I know the rigors of what I went through. I had a lot of math and physics, and
yeah, that's a tough question. I think I don't know, because for a while I thought math was easier precisely because of the rigor, and I think it has to do with Chris's question. It's zero like ambiguity, so like I knew what to do to get it right.
Right.
And in art, there's a little bit more of like an exploration thing that takes time and takes some self-reflection to be like, okay, I'm done, this is worth it. That is hard to like identify, I feel. So I think it depends on the day, honestly, which one is harder. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, for me, the engineering was, but that's.
Okay.
I don't have Ryan as a teacher.
Okay.
Not yet.
David, any thoughts on the workload?
Yeah, I think it's just as Antoinette and Sofia both said, it's based on the student. I knew for myself that like I could have done more, but I would have had to like basically risk my health. And I did towards the end. I actually, like, after finishing everything, and this is not like against Professor Claytor or anything, I was getting really sick after we finished it. After we finished the mini book, I was down for like a week just because I'd overworked myself. And so I think it just depends on the student. I think to some people it could be a lot of work. So again, from experience, I am used to pumping out work in that degree. So. But maybe not to some degree because I did get sick. And so, but yeah, so I think it's just student to student, but it is also not for the faint of heart, as Antoinette said.
Yeah, I mean, you are looking at 3 wildly ambitious students of mine,
right,
who put a lot on themselves. And I hope that you and the viewers will take some time to take a look at their work. It's worth it. And all very different types of work too. But in answer to workload, over the course of the semester, we complete a comic book. That's no joke. For anyone who has tried to do anything associated with comics, to complete an entire comic book over the course of 16 weeks is no joke. Plus, almost every student I have is a full-time student, so they have less important classes on top of the comics class. And a lot of them have jobs they do in addition to that. So yes, it's a lot to take on, but I'm really adamant about having the students have a product at the end of the class. So it's not just a bunch of busy work, it's not just a bunch of projects, but at the end of the semester they have a work that they can sell, they can monetize, and they can point to and use as a portfolio piece and say, this is something that I've completed. Not these are some school projects, but like this is a completed work. And you get that from the very first fundamentals course. And then you can expand on that in the advanced course if you so choose. But that's kind of my approach. And I think you're hearing that, yes, comics is a lot of work, and not for the faint of heart, as they've said a few times. I'm trying to keep some tabs on YouTube and Facebook.
Well, Chris has his question up there. So.
Yeah. So
you see Sofia?
Sofia, I don't know if you can see YouTube or not, but I'll just read Chris's question here real quick. He says, I have a question for Sofia. The ambiguity of comics can make it hard to have them translate to quote-unquote serious academic works. Any thoughts on bridging that? For instance, how you mentioned drawing a panel and it not communicating your intended point. There are rules to written language that help mitigate confusion and meaning.
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I've thought about this before, but the more that I'm in academia, the more that I realize that language is also very ambiguous, and we read all of these articles, and the more that I talk to people around me, we have so many different interpretations of what we just read, and even in language, that ambiguity is there. And I think that that is also a thing that we need to point towards in terms of language, that there's this idea that language has very clear rules, but those clear rules are kind of, it depends on where you are, like your space in which you move, right? There's those, I don't know how to explain, but language is also fluid. So the rules that might be like obvious for a specific circle might not be the rules that we think as obvious in another circle, and there might be like giving for granted that the rules that you have are the universal rules, and I think that's also something that needs to be questioned with language, I think, especially in academia, and how formal English is like the way to like supposedly write serious academia, where there's like other ways of expressing knowledge and other ways that are very valuable. I don't know if that makes sense. But that's a good question, yes. I think also maybe if we have more comics, there will be a little bit more of a kind of a culture of how to, we'll be more familiar in terms of how to interact with comics, I guess, just like we do with language. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in here to say that I think Sofia's work is a prime example of how comics can be used in these alternate spaces. You know, Sofia has a really heavy interest in philosophy and math, and she brings that interest to comics and makes some very different visuals. You know, and her influences, she mentioned Nick Susanis, was very apparent throughout the course, because I could tell she was really pushing the boundaries of the structure of the page, and you saw that in some of her examples too. So yeah, I love the fact that we have so many different approaches to storytelling, to didactics, to page layout, even just in these few heads in front of us. I'm
always kind of interested in when the technical person swings that direction, because I've always straddled that. So it's,
yeah, I'm also seeing a couple comments here on Facebook I thought I'd mention before we wrap up. Amy Menke says, "Yay, David, and super interesting. Thanks for sharing. I can't wait to share with my middle school students." Well, that's really cool. Thank you, Amy. And,
that's my mom.
And Chris also chimed in on YouTube saying thank you and good points. I'm sure that was to Sofia. So thank you, Chris. So I know we've got some more folks coming up here, Bob, so we should probably make our way out.
Well, but, I appreciate.
Please tell Nate Powell that we say hello.
All right. Yeah, he'll be he'll be up here next. So just stay on, keep watching.
He was one of our former Michigan State University Comics Forum keynote speakers,
Right, yeah.
and we're just so proud of what Nate has been doing. So, hi Nate, have a great talk. And Bob, thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. Like I said, I may show up on your doorstep at some point, but we'll see.
Fantastic.
So, thank you.
All right, take care.